Does free will really exist, or are we just imagining that we choose? Do our lives unfold from our own decisions, or are they written out before we even begin? Imagine standing at a crossroads on a quiet evening. No one else around, just you and two paths ahead. In that moment, you feel the weight of choice. You feel the air thick with possibility. You could go left or you could go right. And it is entirely up to you, or so it seems. This feeling, the sense of, I can do this or I could do something else, is at the heart of what we call free will. It is a feeling so real, so powerful, that it shapes how we see ourselves. We like to think of ourselves as authors of our story, steering the ship of our life. But late at night or in the midst of heavy times, many of us wonder quietly in the back of our minds, am I truly steering this ship, or am I just a passenger reading lines in a script already written? The question, does free will really exist, is not just a riddle for philosophers. It is a question that touches each of our lives, because if our choices are not truly ours, then what are we? And if they are ours, then we carry a profound responsibility for them. We have all made choices we regret, and choices we are proud of, and wrapped up in those moments is the idea that we could have done differently, or could we? We ask ourselves, if I had no real choice, maybe I can forgive myself, or maybe nothing. I do matters, and if I do have a choice, then every decision becomes meaningful. So much hangs on this simple yet immense idea of free will. It is a question that can feel unsettling or liberating, or both. Imagine for a moment that every action you ever took was predetermined, as if you were following a script given to you by the universe. Your parents, your biology, or some fate. At first, that idea might sound scary, like being trapped, unable to change the course of your life. But in another way, maybe it is comforting. Maybe it means that you are not to blame for the bad, and not really responsible for the good either. You are just playing a role, but living like that can make life feel hollow, like painting by numbers instead of creating your own picture. On the other hand, think of the opposite idea, that you truly have free will, that you can at any moment choose a different direction, write a new chapter. Nothing is entirely fixed until you act. That thought is thrilling, empowering. It means you are in charge of your destiny, at least in part. But it can also be daunting, because if you are truly free to choose, then the shape of your life is on you. That responsibility can be heavy. Most of us live somewhere between these extremes, feeling somewhat free, somewhat guided by forces beyond us, and not entirely sure how much of our life is ours. To direct philosophers and scientists have debated this for centuries, and still do in ancient times. Many believed in an unchangeable fate or destiny, often illustrated in myths. In some stories, people tried to avoid their fate, but ended up fulfilling it, raising the question, can we ever escape what is meant to be? Later, many religions and philosophers taught that humans have a soul or will that can choose between good and evil. That meant we are not just puppets of fate. We have responsibility for our choices because we can choose. Today, the conversation continues in a new way. In labs and universities, some scientists look at our brains like complex machines following the laws of chemistry and electricity. They have even done experiments asking people to make a simple choice, like pressing a button with their left or right hand. And amazingly, they found that a part of the brain seems to light up moments before the person consciously decides, showing which way they will go. It is as if the brain knows the decision before the mind does. When we hear that, we might think, does that mean my brain made the choice and then tricked me into thinking I made it consciously? It is a strange idea, your own body deciding for you before you are aware. But others interpret it differently. They say our conscious mind and our brain are not separate things. Of course, the brain shows activity. It is still you, doing it just on a level you do not realize. After all, we do so many things without thinking. Breathing, walking, even talking can be automatic at times until we bring our awareness to it. So maybe those experiments just show that a lot goes on under the hood before we notice our own engine working. The debate rages on. But for us living our everyday lives, the question of free will is not just theoretical, it is deeply personal. Think about the choices you make each day. Some feel trivial, like choosing tea or coffee. Some feel life-changing, like choosing a career or whether to start a family. If every choice is just the inevitable result of everything before it, it can make you wonder about the point of it all. But even if that were true, we still experience the act of choosing. When you stand in the cafe and your hand hovers between the chocolate cake and the fruit salad, there is a moment where you feel you could go either way. Your mind weighs taste's health mood, and then you pick one, maybe the chocolate cake because you recall the joy it gave you last time. Now could you have chosen the fruit instead? In that split second, it felt like, yes, I can pick. Either you imagine alternate outcomes. You imagine walking out with the fruit salad as a different version of your day. You see, this little example shows how we live in our minds. We constantly simulate possibilities as if we truly can take either path. And maybe that is a clue. Free will might live in our ability to imagine, to say, I am not just stuck with what is here. I can create or choose something new. Even a simple act like picking dessert carries this profound property of imagining alternatives. This imagination might be one of the most freeing things about being human. Even if our bodies and circumstances have limits, our minds can roam and consider otherwise, and often what we imagine we can begin to bring into reality through our choices. Now consider influences the many invisible strings that guide our choices. How much of what we do is really up to us? We are born with certain temperaments. Some of us are bold, some shy, some naturally cheerful, some prone to melancholy. We did not choose those starting points. They were dealt to us by nature as children. We were shaped by our surroundings. If your parents always encouraged you to read as a kid, you might find yourself loving books today, choosing to spend an evening with a novel over a party. Was that really your free choice, or the result of years of gentle pushing in that direction? If someone grows up in a tough neighborhood, they might feel forced to be tough to survive later in life. That reflex to be aggressive or defensive might kick in even when it is not needed, influencing their decisions. So many factors like culture, peers, education, and random events weave together to form who we are and what we tend to do. Sometimes it feels like we are more a mosaic built by others and circumstances than an independent artist painting our own life. These are heavy realizations, but within them lies something powerful: awareness. When we become aware of the strings that move us, we gain the ability to gently tug back or even cut some of them, if we wish. Imagine a puppet that suddenly becomes aware of its strings. It might not be able to cut them all at once, but it might learn to move in new ways, not entirely dictated by them in a similar way. When you realize, for example, I have a habit of always saying yes to please people because I was taught to be agreeable. Maybe you notice that habit and then you choose sometimes to say no because you actually want something different. That act of defying a conditioning is like the puppet cutting one of its strings and standing on its own for a moment. It can feel shaky. The puppet might wobble without the familiar support of the old string, but it is a new kind of movement, self-directed. Let me share a simple story to illustrate this. There is a young woman who lived in a small town at the foot of a mountain. All her life, she felt like her path was laid out for her, by others, by expectations, by things she thought she had to do. Her parents ran a family store, and everyone assumed she would take it over. One day, she was good at it, and it seemed practical. So she went along with this plan, feeling that saying no was not even an option. As she grew older, she sometimes felt a restlessness inside her, especially when she looked at that mountain on quiet afternoons. It stood there, vast and unmoving, yet it seemed to whisper to her about something beyond the life she knew. She often brushed the feeling aside, focusing on what was expected, doing the next task at the store, day after day. One evening, she closed up shop and felt particularly tired, not just in her body, but in her soul. She realized she could not remember the last time she made a choice, just because she wanted it. Everything had been mapped out. School then, work at the store, then more work. It was as though she had been following a script handed to her the day she was born that night. She had a dream. She stood at the base of the mountain, and a path she had never seen before opened up in front of her, winding up into the unknown. When she woke up, a thought lingered. What if I try something different? The thought was simple, but it felt almost forbidden. She decided that day to do one thing out of her usual pattern. Instead of going straight home after work, she took a detour, a small dirt road that led toward the mountain, just to see how far she could go. Her heart pounded as she walked. It was just a walk, but to her it felt like rebellion, like she was breaking an invisible chain with each step. The town grew smaller behind her, and the mountain grew larger ahead. Halfway up a hill, she stopped and looked back at the lights of the store and her home in the distance. In that moment, she realized something. She was free to walk back or to keep going. It was her choice. No one was telling her what to do. Not society, not family, not even her own fears, which she left at the foot of the hill. She laughed, and it echoed in the early evening air. She sat on a rock watching the sunset paint the sky, and it occurred to her that for the first time in her life she felt truly alive in her own decision. It was a simple decision, just taking a different path home, but it symbolized so much more. The next day, she still opened the store as usual, but something in her had shifted. She began to carve out little moments of choice. She would draw in a sketchbook during quiet hours, following a passion she had as a child for making art. She started gently saying no to things that she did not want, like staying late to do extra work when she was already exhausted. At first, these changes caused tension inside her. She worried she was being selfish or wrong, but as time passed, she realized that the more she exercised this freedom to choose, the more she felt like herself. Her family noticed her change. She was still responsible and caring, but more vibrant, as if some light inside her had turned on. One day, she made the biggest decision of her life. She decided to hand over more of the store responsibilities to her cousin, who had always loved the business, and she stepped away to pursue art full-time. This was met with surprise, even criticism. By some, they said she was abandoning her duty or that she would regret it, and she too felt fear. The night after she announced her decision, she trembled, wondering if the threads of her fate would snap and leave her with nothing, but they did not. She stepped into an uncertain future, but with a sense of ownership she had never known. Her story is a simple one, but it shows how free will can feel. It is like stepping off a road you were told to follow and walking into a forest of unknowns just because something in your heart says to it can be frightening and exhilarating all at once. Her choice was not made in a vacuum. Of course, her ability to even consider leaving the store came from support she had from family savings, courage built from small successes, etc. So in a way, even her leap into freedom was aided by the things life gave her, but she chose to use those gifts in her own way, and that is where we find free will in the use of what we are given. We are all given circumstances, some good, some bad, and we each have a spirit inside that either yields to those circumstances or tries to shape something out of them. Think of a potter with clay. The clay is like our situation. We do not get to choose the material entirely. But as potters of our life, we get to mold it somewhat with our intentions and actions. Two different people dealt. The same clay can shape such different pots. One may surrender to the initial form. The clay came in, another may slowly, patiently turn it into a beautiful vase. The end product is a mix. The clay and the hands, both may be free. Will is like those hands shaping the given clay of life. Some things we cannot change, and maybe those are like the properties of the clay. We must accept them. But other things, the shape of what we make with it, that is where choice plays its tune, like a dance between fate and freedom. Neither exists alone. They work together to create the story of our lives. There is a famous idea from a man who survived terrible hardship. He learned that even when every outer freedom was taken away, one freedom remained: the freedom to choose how to respond, to choose his attitude and his own way. In his darkest moments, when every external freedom was stripped away, he discovered an internal freedom, the freedom to decide how to face even suffering. This is a profound testament to free will, not necessarily the freedom to control what happens to us, but the freedom to control how we respond. No matter how small that freedom may seem, it can never be completely taken away. You can chain a body, but you cannot chain the human spirit's ability to find meaning in our daily lives. We can see this too. Think of a time you were stuck in traffic. You had no control over the cars or the jam. You might have felt frustration rising automatically, but then perhaps you decided, instead of getting angry, to turn on some music or a podcast and use that time in a different way, maybe to learn or to relax. That was a tiny exercise of free will, choosing patience over frustration, choosing a response that was not the default. Maybe the anger was programmed by your brain expecting to get home and being upset at the delay. That part might have been automatic, but you noticed it and then you changed course mentally. How powerful that is, even in such a small, mundane scenario. It shows we have layers to our decision-making. The first layer might be automatic reactive, but there is a second layer, an observer inside us, that can intervene like a rider on a horse, noticing the horse turning off path and gently steering it back. The more we practice listening to that quieter layer, the more we cultivate our sense of agency, our free will in action. Some people worry that if science proves free will is an illusion, then everything is pointless. They fear we would be just biological robots. But here is something to ponder. We humans are the only creatures we know that debate. Free will a lion or an ant is likely not concerned whether it is free, it just lives according to its nature. We, however, have the ability to reflect, to ask such questions, which itself might be a sign of our unique kind of freedom. If we were truly just machines pre-programmed with no wiggle room, why would we even have the sense of being free and the urge to question it? Perhaps the very experience of questioning our own freedom is an expression of freedom. When we question, we create possibilities. We are not just accepting what is given. We are potentially stepping outside the program to examine it. Maybe that is a hint that there is something more than mere programming in us. If everything were predetermined, including our sense of self and choice, it would mean the universe has arranged an incredible play where we get to experience making choices and learning from them. In that case, free will as an experience is still given to us, and it is just as valuable if a puppet is given the gift of thinking it is alive, and choosing that puppet will have a richer life than one who never knows anything but the pull of the strings. So even in a strict deterministic scenario, perhaps our subjective experience of free will is a kind of gift, a very realistic dream we are meant to live out. But if it is a dream, it is one we cannot easily step out of, and perhaps we shouldn't try to too much, because living it is where meaning lies. Life feels engaging because we act as if what we do will make a difference. Often it does. Maybe that alone is evidence enough in practice that we have something like free will, or at least that we must live as though we do. The consequences of our belief in free will are huge. When people believe they have some control over their actions, they often feel more motivated to make good choices, to learn to improve. When people lose that belief, they might slip into feeling helpless. Why try if it is all fate? It is as if our moral muscles atrophy when we think we are not really choosing. On the contrary, when we embrace the idea that we can choose, we often act with more care and determination. We take responsibility. We see options where we thought we had none. We become more creative in solving our problems because we believe our efforts matter. So perhaps believing in free will in itself unlocks some of our potential. Whether or not the philosophers resolve the debate definitively in a way, free will might be like a light guiding us through a dense forest. If you trust it, you find paths where there seem to be only thorns. If you abandon it and say, "I have no light," you may not even try to move and you stay stuck where you are. There is also the aspect of personal growth. If everything about us were fixed, if nothing we did could change who we are, then growth would not make sense. Yet we see that people can change. Someone with a bad temper can learn over time to be patient. Someone who felt timid can gradually become courageous. These transformations happen through choices, sometimes tiny ones day after day. Like exercising a muscle, our character and habits shape with practice. Free will could be that muscle. The more we believe in our capacity to choose differently and act on it, the stronger that capacity becomes. Maybe at first, our freedom is small. We only manage to change one little habit. Then, as we gain confidence, we tackle bigger things. We might start by choosing to take a short walk each morning to clear our mind, an act of will to care for ourselves. Later, we might find we have the strength to change jobs or end a toxic relationship or start a new venture. Each exercise will makes the next one a bit easier, a bit more real. In this way, we grow, we become more the person we want to be, rather than just the person shaped by whatever has happened to us. This is not to say everything is in our control, far from it. Many things happen to us that we never chose and cannot choose away. No one chooses an illness or an accident or the loss of a loved one, or even the random luck of being at the right place at the right time for an opportunity. Life will always have a say in what happens. Free will does not mean omnipotence. It does not mean we can bend reality to our desires. No, it simply means within what life hands us, we have some say in what we do with it, and often that is enough to change how we feel about life entirely. Because if I cannot choose an outcome, I can still choose my attitude or my effort, and that can make a world of difference. For example, two people might face the same storm. One curses the rain and feels victim to it. Another uses it as a chance to dance in the puddles or to stay in and read a book by candlelight. The storm is the same. The reactions are different because of a choice in perspective. The one who danced created a memory of joy. The one who cursed created a memory of misery. Such is the power of our inner free will, the will to assign meaning to events, the will to adapt and find some light, even in darkness. Now, as we near the end of this reflection, we might still not have a clear-cut answer to the question, does free will really exist? The truth is, we may never know for certain, at least not in the way we know the sun rises in the east or that fire is hot. Free will is a subtle thing. It is part science, part philosophy, part deeply personal introspection. Perhaps free will exists in how it transforms us. When we believe in our ability to choose, we become a little braver, a little more responsible to ourselves and others. We stop simply flowing down the river of time like a leaf, and instead, we start swimming, even if just a little, towards a direction. We choose. Maybe we do not control the river, but we can navigate it. And in doing so, we find meaning. Maybe free will is less about what is absolutely true in a cosmic sense, and more about how it feels and what it does for us. If feeling free leads you to take positive action, to care for someone, to create something beautiful, to change something harmful into something better, then that feeling is as good as real. in its consequences, in the grand tapestry of life. We might be threads following a pattern beyond our understanding. Yet each thread has its subtle wiggle, its own tiny influence on the picture. We are like dancers in a dance where the music is given, but the way we move is our own. So, does free will really exist? Maybe it does in moments like when we love, despite having been hurt before, when we forgive, instead of continuing a cycle of pain when we try again. After failing in those moments, we are not just reacting, we are choosing a higher path against the pull of easier impulses. Every time we do that, it feels like a triumph of the human spirit, a glimpse of freedom. Free will may not be absolute, but perhaps it is enough to give us dignity and hope. We might be shaped by our past, but we are not defined by it unchangeably. We have a say as you listen to this and reflect on your own life. Think of the times you made a choice that changed things, big or small, when you said yes or no and it mattered that you did. So, those are your moments of will shining through. And even when you felt you had no choice at all in some situations, you still chose how to perceive it. Later, how to carry it in your heart. Maybe that is the secret. Even when we cannot choose the music that plays, we can choose how we dance to it. We can sway with sorrow or with joy. We can march in anger or glide in peace. And that choice makes all the difference in what life ultimately feels like. Our story may have many authors, the universe, our biology, our society. But we are a co-author too, and that is a precious collaboration. It means your life is a story, partly written for you, but also written by you in each decision you make. So does free will really exist? Perhaps the best answer is this. If you believe in it and act as if your choices matter, you craft a life that reflects your own heart and mind, and in that life you will feel the reality of your freedom. Free will exists in each brave act of choice. In each moment, you take responsibility for who you are and who you become. It exists in you every time you decide to try again, to love again, to dream again. Despite the odds in the end, free will is not just a concept. It is an experience, a practice, and a gift. And whether given by nature or something divine, it is up to us to use it. So let us cherish our capacity to choose, even as we remain humble about the factors that shape us. Let us live fully and consciously, embracing the freedom we have, however small it may be when we do. That life becomes not just something that happens to us, but something we actively participate in, and that simple fact can transform even the most ordinary day into an adventure. So step forward and continue your story with courage and care, knowing that in the beautiful mystery of existence, your will is a part of the dance. Does free will really exist in this very moment as you decide what this message means to you? The answer is already unfolding within you.